Welcome, everyone. My name is Alison. I work for Trinity College London as the Head of Business Development for the UK and Ireland. Amazing to see everyone here, and I love watching the chat to see where everyone is coming from. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. If you didn't join our welcome session, I know some people are just kind of going straight into sessions from the program. Just a reminder about today. You need to join each session from the program, so each has a unique link. So when this session finishes, go back to the main program to kind of navigate and choose the next session that you'd like to do. And also, we've had a few questions about getting a report of attendance. There is a QR code on the screen there. If you want a report of attendance, please complete that form, and we will be sending digital certificates of attendance out to everyone probably within a week or two after the conference. We have quite a lot to process, so bear with us. And if you can't scan the QR code, either myself or Maria, who's helping me as a moderate, will put the link to the form in the chat box. If you do have questions for our presenters, please can you use the Q&A box. That will help us kind of make sure that we ask those questions towards the end. If you want to kind of respond or speak to peers and colleagues in the chat, that's absolutely fine. But if you have a burning question, make sure that you put that in the chat box so we can grab that at the end. So I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to our first speakers for the technology and innovation strand. And this session is towards a more effective extensive speaking scheme using a Microsoft Flip. And our speakers are K.Thomas and S.Chak, both of whom work in Japan under the British Council, and they are involved with planning and delivering the English language courses for a number of local universities in the Tokyo area in Japan. So I'm going to hand over to Keir and Stephen, and I will join you at the end to answer any questions that you might have. And again, a very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thanks for joining us, everyone. It's lovely to have so many people in the room. As Alison said, my name is K.Thomas, and I'm with my colleague S.Chak. We both work for the British Council in Tokyo, and we actually work at a client university. And we're very excited to, and a little bit nervous, to be sharing our research with you today. It looks like the organisers have got a really great day planned, and we're both looking forward to attending the other sessions after this one. So our presentation today reports a work in progress paper that we've been collaborating on for the past couple of months. And in the presentation, we will talk about our experience and procedures in implementing an extensive speaking program at our Japanese university using the Microsoft Flip platform. And it's a kind of critical review of our own program. We'll also share with you the data that we've collected on successes and challenges that we've faced, and we'll propose some potential solutions to those problems that we faced. As I mentioned, it's a work in progress paper, so our findings are provisional and still require some further analysis. But we both feel that the initial findings are interesting and worth sharing with you here today. However, it is worth mentioning that after submitting both our paper and indeed this conference proposal, we received a very surprise message from Microsoft on the 4th of June when they announced that they would be rebranding and bundling Flip into their Teams for Education package. And this means that the standalone website and app will be discontinued from July 1st. This is the free app that we've been using for the last few years. And this was much to the dismay of educators on Twitter and to both Stephen and I, who had already submitted our proposal. However, our presentation focuses more on extensive speaking theory in course design rather than the specific features of Flip itself. So hopefully you'll still find it useful. And at the end, we'll suggest a couple of alternative tools that you could use to replace Flip if your school doesn't have access to Microsoft Teams for Education, and if you're interested in implementing an extensive speaking program yourself. So what is Flip? Flip used to be called Flipgrid, and it's a really popular video sharing website and app made for education. It was released back in 2014 and it's been gradually growing since then. And it's a place for students to get together and record their videos and then watch and respond and interact with each other's videos. It includes a number of very kind of 21st century engagement functionalities that young people tend to like, stickers, emojis, filters, those kinds of things. And it comes with a built-in auto subtitle generator, which can be quite helpful. Its usage grew enormously throughout the COVID online teaching period and was particularly beneficial for courses that didn't have a live video-based interactions, so like non-Zoom-based classes, because it helped build connections between students and indeed teachers while everyone was stuck at home in their bedrooms in isolation. For English as a foreign language, it also creates opportunities for students to get some speaking practice outside the classroom, which is something that I'm sure we've all experienced, that our students are constantly asking about. So just to give you a little flavour of what students can post to Flip, I'm just going to play you a short clip of one of my students using it. It's only 30 seconds long, but it'll show you the kind of speech they produce. And you might notice that the auto captions get a few words wrong, but you'll see there's lots of potential for pronunciation activities on that. Now, in testing, when I practiced this, the sound maybe wasn't very clear, so we'll see what happens today. If you can't hear anything, please just shout at me. Thank you.
Today, I'm going to talk about snow leopards, it's called yukihyo in Japanese, and human threats to this animal. First of all, the biggest threat is illegal wildlife trading. This is because hunting snow leopards is profitable. For example, their beautiful fur is used in clothes, and their bones and other body parts are used in traditional medicine.
And although this was only a very short clip, our students can post videos for, I think it's up to 10 minutes is the maximum. It gives them a really decent length of time to share something meaty. So how and why did we start to use Flip in our course? To answer that, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background as to why we felt the need to introduce an extensive speaking component on our course. And to do that, I'll first introduce a little bit about the educational situation in Japan before giving a really brief overview of extensive speaking and what it is, and then how we implemented it into our course. So there's a stereotype that Japanese speakers of English struggle to speak much more than their Asian counterparts, and the data generally does support this. As you can see from the graph, there's been a really steady decline in proficiency over the last few years, with last year reaching a new low. And while many students can read and write fairly well, their speaking does tend to lag behind. And this is due to a combination of factors, but primarily it's that the college entrance exams in Japan, they don't actually have a speaking component of the English test. And therefore, high schools focus on teaching to the test, particularly on reading and grammar. There's also a persistence in Japan, believe it or not, of grammar translation style methods and lecture style lessons, which provide very few opportunities for communication for students. And that really impacts students' motivation and confidence in speaking English. So, in summary, learners reach our university with very little confidence or experience in speaking English. And from our experience of working with them, it was clear that we needed to do something to try and improve that and to try and give them some extra opportunities to practice speaking outside the classroom. And that's why we decided to implement an extensive speaking program. So what is extensive speaking exactly? I'm not going to go into too much detail on the theory. I'll just give a whistle-stop tour here. But it's the less studied sister of extensive reading and extensive listening, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, both of which are kind of rooted in Krashen's input hypothesis. And they state that language acquisition occurs when learners are exposed to large amounts of language input that's slightly beyond their current proficiency level. This input should still be understandable to the learner, but also include elements that kind of challenge them to advance them up to the next level. And teachers will often support and guide their learners and point them towards suitable resources that are just that little bit above their level. And they often recommend that learners keep reading journals to log their progress. Now, this is clearly very beneficial for receptive skills, but many people argue that actually it's output that we need. And it's output that is and producing language that can help drive our language development forward. It's kind of noticing the gaps where we're missing things, particularly when we're being challenged linguistically. So this is what we're interested in, producing language. So building on this idea that we need to produce, Gu and Reynolds attempted to convert a set of extensive reading principles into extensive speaking and create a framework for implementing an extensive speaking program. And this was the study and the framework that's inspired the research that we're presenting to you today. And some of those key principles that they suggested are that learners have a variety of topics that they can choose from, and that their speech is at or below their current level, which is unlike extensive reading, which is above their current level. This is kind of we don't pressure them to incorporate specific lexis or structures when we do this. They also recommend it's regular. Like all practice, it needs to be regular, and that it's a required part of the course. The English should be ungraded, so there's no pressure for students that they're worried about grades, but there should be plenty of positive and constructive feedback from the teacher. Now, this is just 6 of the 10 principles that they came up with. And we didn't actually adhere to all of these principles because our program grew kind of organically. Different teachers started experimenting with it and sharing it with others. And so the program developed before we'd done any research into it or before we knew any of the theory behind it. And in fact, the principles in green were the only ones we were doing consistently. It's also worth mentioning that many early extensive speaking programs, including the Gu and Reynolds study here, had students record alone using a dictaphone or a tape recorder and then sharing that with the teacher. But Flip adds this social element which we think has the potential to really positively impact their motivation and engagement. So using social video sharing websites for extensive speaking is quite a new kind of field here. So that's a little bit about the background. I'd like now briefly just to introduce our context and how we created our program. So as I said at the beginning, we teach at a university in Western Tokyo. We're keeping the name of the university anonymous because we're critiquing the program that we're offering them. But our university is very nicely represented by this AI generated image, which is fairly accurate actually. Our course it's a first year undergraduate course, and it's what we call a kind of soft EAP course, in that it sits somewhere between academic English and general English. Our students are generally at B1, B2 kind of level, with very high reading proficiency, but a weakness in their other skills, particularly their speaking. And they lack confidence and experience with English conversations. So to address this, we felt there was a real clear opportunity for some asynchronous speaking practice outside the classroom. So this is how we did it. Our approach was to work on a 3-lesson cycle, which reflects how long it takes for us to kind of cover one unit of the textbook. We use Unlock 3 textbook, and we teach it across three lessons. So in the first lesson of the unit, students record a video for homework, sharing their opinion on a prompt related to the topic. So for example, for the environment topic, do you think Japan should restart its nuclear reactors? And they have to give their opinion and support their opinion. Then for homework in the second lesson, students will watch an assigned partner's videos and then record a reply to it, adding a comment on what they found interesting and asking any questions that they have. And then for the final homework, students respond to the questions they've been asked. And this creates a kind of slow motion conversation that's spread out across 3 weeks. Just as an aside, we implemented that the assigned partners after a couple of years because some students were kind of not getting any responses. They were shouting into the void, and it was a bit of a shame that nobody was watching or responding to their videos. So by assigning partners, we're kind of guaranteeing that everyone gets a reply and they can have this conversation. We made it compulsory. It contributes to 5% of their grade, but the quality of their English is not assessed. It's simply participation and doing the homework, posting the videos. And teachers are encouraged to give kind of general whole class feedback, but we don't have time for individual feedback, so it's only very, very general. So how did our students react? Well, the initial feedback was quite mixed. And for those familiar with British idioms, it was a bit marmitey. Kind of the anecdotal comments that we heard from students suggested that, for some it was enjoyable. They found that it helped them prepare for their presentations. But others, many of them said it was mendokusai. This is the Japanese word for it's a hassle. And a lot of them were saying recording videos was embarrassing. Now, we were a little bit surprised by that, and we really believe in the benefits of our program, and so we wanted to find out how to make it better. And we wanted to discover the roadblocks that prevented students from enjoying and engaging with it. As I mentioned earlier, our FLIP program kind of grew organically without much research into the best practice. So our study then was to kind of do a critical analysis of our scheme with a view to improve some of the shortfalls. Stephen, I'm handing over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Kia. So, like Kia said, the research component of this study really grew out of the need we felt to kind of research and improve on this practice that we had that we felt was worth doing. So I'm just going to take over in the next part and walk through the design of our investigation. So it started out as a somewhat informal inquiry that kind of became more solidified over time. Our overall purpose was really about improving the program and figuring out how extensive speaking can be part of a bigger thing in our program. And as you can see from the research questions on the screen, there are three things that we wanted to accomplish. The first one was that we wanted to find out what were the positive and negative feelings that students had from the extensive speaking program. So from, like Kia was saying just now, from the anecdotal opinions that we collected, students were not 100% sold on what they were getting out of it, and some of them felt that was embarrassing. So we wanted to see how far that went. In the second research question, we wanted to also see what benefits students feel that it brings to their English development. Some of them said that it was good for their presentations, but we also wanted to see, whether there was anything else that they felt FLIP was helping them with. And finally, the last research question is just kind of an overall wrap up of what we were trying to accomplish. How can we improve the extensive speaking program? How can we make it better and more worthwhile for our students? So overall, we wanted to confirm what we were hearing, and we wanted to see how widespread these different opinions were. And also, we wanted to see what was being recognized throughout the program. So we set out on developing a questionnaire that looked into those areas. The questionnaire was drafted based on the feedback we heard about enjoyment, about skills development, feelings that students were having when they were participating in this program. And also we included a section where we tried to find out more about what students thought would be beneficial for the course going forward. So we asked students, in the next year for students entering the university after you, what do you think would be good, in terms of FLIP? We translated the questionnaire so that students could answer in their native language in Japanese, and we tested it out with a small group beforehand to make sure that it made sense. We also included some open questions because we were already thinking about collecting qualitative data at that point, but we weren't really expecting many students to answer those because they were optional questions. So we had to look for another source of qualitative data. In the end, we decided to use some of the comments we received on our forum, on our learning management system forum, as part of the year-end reflection on various activities done on the course. So from that, we thought that gave us a nice mix of quantitative and qualitative data for analysis. So once again, this is still a work in progress. So we're wading through a large amount of data. None of this is final, but we feel that what we have right now is worth sharing. So our approach towards the analysis was through kind of a mixed method way. Factor analysis was done to validate our questionnaire results after we had the descriptive data altogether. I'll explain what the purpose of the factor analysis is in a second. On the qualitative side, we thought that thematic analysis was a good framework, and that it would help us clarify the comments that we got into the themes that gave us some actionable data to draw on. So overall, the descriptive data was what we expected. The numbers lean slightly towards indicating a lack of enjoyment in many of the activities. This was a little bit, I guess, disappointing, but also kind of what we expected. And we felt that the confirmation gave us a little bit more motivation to really continue the research and continue thinking about how to improve things. So students felt that they were embarrassed. Students felt that that it was a hassle. But on the other hand, they also recognized that there was skills development on the course. So in fact, now we're going to look at the different specific categories of the data. So in terms of enjoyment, the statements that students felt the strongest about were related to the act of making the videos themselves. We were working with a 6-point scale, as you can see on the chart on the screen. So the numbers you see here are not hugely negative. They mostly fluctuate between something like 3 and slightly to the negative side, but they do show that students' feelings were a bit tepid. So they said that they don't really enjoy recording the videos. They don't really enjoy recording questions. On the other hand, they did enjoy watching the videos. So we can kind of already see that students enjoy the social aspect of participating in something like this. They enjoy seeing their classmates giving their opinions. They enjoy being part of a discussion. They just don't really like having to do it themselves. So this might say something about the personalities of our students. I think a lot of us come from an Asian context, and students here, they really lack the confidence for spontaneous, unplanned output. And so maybe this result is going to be helpful for a lot of you as well. We were also looking at affective factors. So this actually was something that showed up even more strongly. You can see that based on the 3 statements that we have on the screen, students saw the making of the videos as quite troublesome. They saw it as very time consuming. The time consuming aspect was initially a bit surprising to us since the videos were only meant to be between 1 to 3 minutes long. So we weren't at all thinking that they were going to take a long time doing it. And we'll discuss the reason for this later on. But we realized that without proper instructions, students were approaching the task in a very different way. And it ended up taking a lot more of their time. So perhaps that this was why this in turn affected their emotions surrounding the task. So this was another major area that we had to kind of address. So on the positive side, students did recognize that doing these videos developed their fluency, it developed their proficiency, it developed their presentation skills as well. This was despite the emotional resistance from the previous categories. So I think this is also probably due to the fact that we had an assessed presentation as part of the course near the end of the year. So the alignment of a presentation with this flip video activity could have helped them see that there was a benefit to the videos that they were doing every week. Finally, we asked students some questions about what they thought the extensive speaking program should look like in the future. And we asked them whether they thought it should be assessed, whether the teacher should play their videos in class for everyone to see. No one was a fan of that, no surprises there. And whether they thought they should do more of it or less of it in the class. The strongest agreement that was expressed was towards the statement that they should be given more variety in the choice of topics. So I think they wanted more agency on what they could talk about. And this is something that when we looked back into the literature, it was kind of supported by the review that we did based on extensive reading, based on extensive listening principles. So the next step for us was the factor analysis of the results. Again, this isn't something that's a work in progress. We're not going to go into very quantitative details here, but we did this because of two reasons. First, we wanted to make sure that our questionnaire results were statistically sound, and it also helped us compare answers between the different groups of students more efficiently. We really were particularly interested in seeing how high affective students, that is, students who were enjoying the activities, how did they answer the other questions? Did they also think that it developed their skills? Did they also find it embarrassing to do the extensive speaking videos? Because we thought that if we knew what the high enjoyment students were thinking, it could help us pinpoint what we needed to do. So the results of the factor analysis show that we had reasonably high factor loadings for our questions. So the questionnaire was doing a reasonably good job of measuring what we set out to do. We took two items that you can see on the screen. So we took two items each from each of the categories that we were doing, and we did some preliminary analysis on what we were talking about. And the results were actually quite interesting. So we found that students who enjoy these flip videos, they tend to appreciate being given agency more. So if they enjoy it less, they tend to appreciate being given agency less. So if they don't enjoy it, they tend to say, no, I don't really care. I don't really want to have more topics to choose from. I don't really care that there should be more interesting topics. What that possibly means overall is that if the students enjoy the tasks less, they might become quite apathetic towards it. They might have a mindset where they're thinking, I'm just trying to get through this assignment. I don't really consider the content, the topics. And this ended up being related probably to a lower recognition of the benefits, as you can see from the third point. One surprising thing that we found, strangely, was that students who have high enjoyment do not report lower affective factors. So even students who were enjoying the task, they still felt really embarrassed by it. They still felt that it was a hassle. But it's possible that this shows that enjoyment is really useful in helping students benefit, and it's also helping students push through the less pleasant part of the task, and then they do it, they take it seriously, and then they get the benefits. So it's very clear to us at this point that we needed to foster stronger enjoyment, especially since extensive speaking activities are done outside of class, away from teacher supervision. They don't have us looking over their shoulders. So how do we foster enjoyment in that environment? So in the thematic analysis, we look at some of the specific aspects that students find the most enjoyable. So I'm handing it back over to Kier to talk about this.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, as Stephen said, obviously we decided that creating enjoyment was a strong priority here, as we believe enjoyment, it's a key factor in language learning. So we conducted a thematic analysis on just a randomized set of students' forum posts discussing what they liked or disliked about Flip. And the first main theme was that students really enjoyed exchanging ideas and gaining new insights. The most positive comments mentioned that hearing others' points of view was really interesting, and particularly when it was divergent from their own. And in fact, on the flip side, many students expressed dislike at having to comment on their classmates when they had identical opinions, because they couldn't think of anything to say or to ask them. And this supported our quantitative data, suggesting that students find more enjoyment in the social aspect of Flip. But it also tells us the importance of creating topics and tasks that allow for a genuine exchange of differing opinions. The second theme supported our data, suggesting that students do actually recognise the value of extensive speaking skills on their English development. And surprisingly, many students mentioned that they could learn from watching their peers, which is quite often untrue for our students, particularly when it comes to writing development, as they seem to say that only their teacher can help them develop. They learn nothing from each other's writing. They need it from an expert. But for speaking, they seem to be able to learn from each other. And some students also mentioned improvements to the end of year presentation. So our students give a 10-minute in-class presentation as the final thing they do on our course. And students seem to see a link between extensive speaking and their presentation skills development. And so this gave us the confidence that the scheme was worth persevering with, and motivates us to find a like-for-like replacement for Flip. Finally, there's some fairly obvious roadblocks and frustrations that became a barrier to their enjoyment. One of which we were surprised to find that students found it hard to find a quiet place and time to record their videos, which was strange because they have a full week to complete their homework. So we suspect that many of them were leaving it until half an hour before the class and suddenly finding themselves trying to find a quiet spot on campus. And they end up recording in the corner of the classroom while we are setting up the class at the front. A slightly more alarming finding was that many students reported they were writing full transcripts of what they wanted to say. This is potentially because they were scared of getting it wrong, or making mistakes, or because they didn't have the confidence for spontaneous speech. And this was certainly not our intention, and we completely recognise that's very time-consuming and frustrating for them. And having a script in front of them may also encourage them to do frequent retakes, which is something else they mentioned, because when they make a mistake or they flip off script, they think they need to start again. And that's not at all what we wanted. So we noted that down as a suggested improvement, which we'll discuss shortly. So to attempt to bring all the data together, the data confirms what we initially thought from those anecdotal student comments. They have affective issues from some parts of the programme, and this creates a barrier to enjoyment. We also identified some strengths of the programme, particularly in their skills development, and that they enjoy the social aspects of learning from each other. Finally, we managed to narrow down some of the affective issues, and finding out that students disliked having to find places to record, redoing recordings, making scripts, and feeling embarrassed about speaking to an audience. So we'll end our presentation by just talking through 3 improvements that we are experimenting with this semester to try to kind of improve our offering. The first one, to course correct our affective issues, is to try and be more clear in what we expect from students, what the benefits of the scheme is and what the requirements are. And to do that, we've created a short overview document that students read that really clearly outlines what they're doing, explains that it's not graded, explains the purpose of it, and that they shouldn't be writing a script. They can just write a couple of notes, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We're also, as teachers, we're trying to model more clearly what we expect from them. So at the beginning, we're taking them through the process of recording and editing and posting the video, showing that even when we make mistakes, which we all do in our native language, that there's no need to record. Maybe give them some repair strategies, just show them that it's okay. Similarly, we're suggesting that students kind of play around with some of the fun features of the app, getting them to use stickers and filters, maybe teaching them about hooks to hook their audience's attention, and just try and turn it into more like a fun TikTok or YouTube Shorts video, rather than like a compulsory grind that the teacher assigns them and that they have to get through. The second improvement was a really simple one, and that was to add more topic choice. Previously, we were only giving them one topic and they all had to respond to the same topic, and some of them were a bit hit and miss as to how good they were. So in line with the research that we discovered, we decided to add 3 choices. The first one was the textbook topic, but then we added another one related to their university life or their social lives, and then one free choice where they could talk about current affairs, Euro 2024, anything that was interesting to them. And this so far seems to have been a real success. We've already seen a solid split of students, some preferring the academic conversations, and some preferring the more personal topics. So that seems to have been a winner. And Stephen's going to comment on the final improvement now.
Thanks, Kia. So the final point that we have is really a comment on the existing literature. We think that earlier extensive speaking designs were perhaps based a little bit too much on the tenets of extensive reading and extensive listening as solo activities. And we think that we need to acknowledge that speaking is inherently built on interactions, and it would be a lot less effective without it. So social aspects are an important part of extensive speaking, and we've started to include some feedback that guides students towards this focus. In the feedback, we've tried to stress the need to move away from repeating the points that students already have covered in class, and instead we try to praise creativity, we try to praise things that are surprising us, and positively reinforce those things. So here are a couple of examples. So here's what Kia does in his flip feedback. We've kind of started to focus on focus our attention on what we find is important. So you can see we're showing interest about what students are saying. We're praising them for things that are going well, and we're giving feedback and advice, specifically focusing on how things don't need to be perfect. You don't need to re-record every time you slip. And also, this is not directly related, but for me, I try to do a little bit of, I try to take the opportunity to work with sentence stress. This is so that we give students a chance to try and improve on sentences that they mispronounce in the video, and also improve their comprehensibility a little bit. So in conclusion, I'm going to speed through this here because we've been told that we're running out of time. But basically, we believe that social video sites like Flip have made it possible to practice speaking outside the classroom. And we've talked about how, even though we've returned entirely to face-to-face teaching, it's still nice to take advantage of this kind of technology to strengthen the learning community in the classroom. So we really believe in this being part of ELT going forward. So we've talked about what we think based on the data. We've talked about how it's very important to put the social aspect at the forefront, and also how we should be allowing more topic autonomy and variety. So thank you very much for attending our presentation. We hope we've at least sold some of you on trying out this kind of activity. Here are our emails if you would like to get in touch for anything related to this presentation, or any questions you might have that we can't answer today. The announcement for the change in the platform that Flip is going away kind of caught us by surprise last week. But we think that the technology is not really unique, nor is it really the focus. The focus is in the principles, and we hope that the principles can be applied on many different platforms. As you can see, we've put a couple of possible replacements for Flip on the slide. So that brings us to the end of our presentations. I think we'll have some questions right now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen and Kier. I really enjoyed that. I lived and taught in Japan for 6 years. I taught for a few years and then I worked in publishing. So this is all really interesting to me as somebody who's kind of experienced speaking anxiety with students, and yeah, really thorough. It was really practical and really clear kind of how you carried that all out. So I enjoyed listening to it. There are a few questions. Obviously, you've talked about some of the replacements for Flip. Somebody did ask about using a purely video-based recorder like Vicaroo, and I think, Kier, you were going to try to answer that. Is that something that you are familiar with? I guess the pros and cons from your point of view.
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with Vocaroo, and I wasn't sure if it was a like a social website or whether it was only a private thing that teachers can see. So I wasn't sure about that, I'm afraid.
That's okay. All right. Somebody's asking about frequency of using this. So weekly basis, daily basis. What would be your recommendations on that? I think that's Conan has asked that question.
I think honestly, more than weekly would probably be best. Regular every 2 or 3 days, maybe shorter videos to accommodate that would be good. The only reason we do it weekly is because we only have a speaking and listening lesson with them once a week, so that fits into our lessons. But I would encourage them to do it more often. If they were keen and motivated to do it themselves, I would encourage them to aim for 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm not going to be able to answer all of these. I'm trying to pick out a few because we're running out of time. Oh, this is an interesting one. Students mention that they learn from their peers. Could hearing incorrect usage also lead to fossilization?
Good question.
It is it's a tricky one. That
It
one.
is. Yeah, I think that probably highlights the importance of teachers giving feedback, and maybe if they notice any kind of major errors like that others are gonna take on, providing feedback in the class and correcting those would be good. On the other hand, that creates a lot of work for the teacher to be, going through all the videos with a fine-tooth comb. We don't watch all of them generally because we don't have time. We just do a sample. So yeah, that's a fair concern, I'd say.
Great. And I'll take the last one. Oh, sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Sorry. No, just wanted to add to that. I think it's a valid concern, but it's also a good chance to kind of address comprehensibility issues. So if you're seeing that students are pronouncing things wrong in a way that affects how other students are maybe able to or not able to understand them, I think that's a really good chance to address it, because not every kind of mispronunciation is related to comprehensibility. So I think that's a choice that teachers might have to make when they review these videos in their classes.
Absolutely. Great. I'm just going to take one more question here from Thomas. I agree with the notion of speaking practice for speaking's sake. However, what kind of workaround do you suggest in this regard for students who may be quite grades driven, or they may be turned off once they discover the activity is ungraded, or I guess graded above their level?
Stephen, do you fancy fielding this one?
That's another tricky question. Well, at least they were engaged, right? They're asking really good questions, actually.
I think it's so what we do on our course is that we grade them for participation, we grade them for completion. We're not there to pick on the language. And potentially, so what we've been talking about the entire time was that we really have to kind of focus on the social aspect. So I think for a lot of the students who are quite grade focused, it's because they feel that they're not really getting much out of this otherwise. So I would say take the opportunity to pick up on something interesting they've said, front that in the feedback, front that in the class. Say, for example, you've really taught me something new, and that would perhaps be able to encourage them to approach it in a more communicative manner rather than, I did this, I'm getting the grade. So, that apathy is the problem. But how do we get over it? And I think it's about fronting the social aspect.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to end it there. Obviously, Keir and Stephen's details are there if you want to stay in touch or connect, I guess, over LinkedIn. I'm sure that, they'd be happy to hear from you. I did just want to say, Trinity, we are very much about communicative competence and encouraging assessments that actually are very authentic and encourage people to speak. So I did just put a link in the chat about the graded examinations in spoken English. There's something for everyone, but that's a one-to-one dialogue with an examiner. And there's also schemes of work, lots of really useful speaking activities and things for people to discover about Trinity as well. So, all right, we're going to end it there. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. I'll remind you.